Welcome in, everybody. Hello, I am John Kurtz. What a freaking weekend of college football, huh? I mean, just when you think it's going to be a sleepy Saturday with one matchup of top 25 teams and that's it, you get complete and total chaos. Complete and total chaos up and down the landscape. Look, the Big 12 has been leading the way on chaos, right? It's been chaotic in the Big 12 for a couple of weeks now. The rest of college football just seems to now be catching up. So as per usual, Brett Yormark is the trendsetter here in college football. But boy, I tell you what we saw, and I'm talking not just on the field, but off the field, what we saw all day Saturday is such a perfect encapsulation of why stripping this sport for parts to just pump up the SEC and Big Ten is such not only just a shame for all the fan bases involved that stand to lose something in that, but it's a shame for us all, and it will destroy the sport. Because a weekend like that was really refreshing, kind of rejuvenating for the college football soul to see all of that, which I think there are a lot of interesting ways to dive into that. How much of this is the impact of NIL and the transfer portal? How much of this is the impact of conference realignment, teams having to travel more? We've got a great stat about that from John Wilner, who covered the Pac-12 like nobody else, and now is covering those teams that have to make all the time zone travel arrangements here. There are a lot of different ways to dissect it, but at the end of the day, the best thing about the sport, the thing that we love about the sport so much, is the fact that upsets like that can happen, that we can have days like that where freaking Vanderbilt beats number one Alabama the week after Alabama beat Georgia in one of the most epic college football games we've ever seen. That depth that that college football has, range, that's the word I'm looking for. That range that college football has to go from delivering one week an unbelievable game that we talked about for years because it was at the peak, the pinnacle of the sport. Alabama, Georgia, top-ranked teams, incredible comeback, great game, insane atmosphere, to the next week delivering another game that we'll talk about for years because it was Vanderbilt, the downtrodden team in that conference, beating the winner of that game from the previous week. It's just nuts, man. It's nuts. And when you throw in the fact College GameDay decided to go to Cal, and that was an awesome, awesome scene, like a fan base that you would never expect to really show up the way that they did. Kudos to Cal fans. It made game day far more interesting to me than it has been in a long time. And wow, would you imagine that? It gets more interesting when you stop going to the same 5 SEC and Big Ten spots week in, week out. Great for the sport. Love it for everybody in Big 12 ACC country here on this channel. If you are new, originates out of Big 12 country. And so a lot of us certainly feel a little bit left behind these days by the sport, but that is the type of day, even though it wasn't like it was a bunch of non-conference upset wins, that's the type of day where if you're not one of those top 5 to 10 brands, you feel pretty good. You feel pretty good. It's cathartic in a way, and it makes you feel good about the sport and what is great about the sport for everybody. I will talk plenty more about that. We've got to get into, man, there are some absolute messes going on in the Big 12 right now, man. Clean up aisle, Oklahoma State. What is happening in Stillwater? I was trying to be really patient with Mike Gundy and say, hey, I made the mistake last year of jumping on board a bit too early with the downfall of Gundy after the offseason in South Alabama. Boy, I look silly for holding out as long as I have this year because, that's bad. That's bad, bad, bad. Nothing against West Virginia, but to get throttled like that by anybody in your home building, terrible. TCU, they're 8-12 now since beating Michigan in the playoff. Embarrassed at home by Houston. Is Sonny Dykes going to survive the year? I don't. TCU, disaster. UCF, I don't know. Of all the things here, and I picked Oklahoma State to win the Big 12. But of all the teams in the league, I don't know that I've been more disappointed than I have been by UCF and the opportunities missed the last 2 weeks that they've had. Just insane. Just insane, man. We can update the Big 12 race. I've got Big 12 hot takes from you guys that I asked for on Twitter, which you can follow me at JL Kurtz. So there's a lot to get to, my friends. There is an absolute lot to get to here on the show. If you've been here before, you know how to be a part of the show. You can chip in by clicking the $ below the chat box. If you do that, it will create a super chat, which means you will get on the show tonight. A lot of people in here. We're pushing 500 already. So tough to get a word in edgewise unless you do that. And also just a great way to support the channel. And I couldn't do it without all of you guys who do. But otherwise, fill up that chat anyway. Make it fun. Make it exciting. I'm here for you guys to have a great time while the show is going on. If you could like the video, that is awesome as well. If you aren't catching this live, for those that are watching after the fact, John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo is a good way to support the channel as well. If you submit a donation there, leave a question or comment there, I will kick off the next show with it as well. So lots of ways to be involved. And the other thing I would mention, one, if you're on Twitter, which of the 500 people that are here, about 2/3 are from Twitter right now. If you're on Twitter and you want to be a part of this chat and you want more content like this on a regular basis, make sure and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Just John Kurtz on YouTube is where you can find that. That's how you can become a bit more involved here than just watching on Twitter. But the other thing I would encourage you to do, if you are a Big 12 fan or simply a college football fan who wants to stay up to date on the Big 12, make sure you subscribe to my Big 12 newsletter, Open for Business. I'm filtering out all the Big 10 and the SEC news to get you the Big 12 news that you want. It's almost impossible if you're trying to read that at your traditional news sources out there. So ofbnews.com. That's ofbnews.com to subscribe to my Open for Business Big 12 newsletter. Big 12 news straight to your inbox multiple times per week. No Big 10 or SEC bias, totally free, and a great way to support everything that I'm doing right now. So would highly encourage that if you would be so inclined. Okay. I had a couple of people here. We had Ed. Okay, so I've got to get Ed's email pulled up here. Ed sent me a lot of thoughts, and I appreciate it, Ed. Here we go. No, that's the wrong one. Boy, I'm sorry, Ed. I should have been more prepared here before the show. All right, here it is. So, Ed, I appreciate your support. There is a lot here. I'm not going to be able to get to all of it. But this was in response. I like what you had to say in response to the 4 automatic bids that the SEC and the Big 10 are vying for in the college football playoff, which I wrote about in Open for Business last week, which is a perfect example of what you get at ofbnews.com. I didn't give you this story about like, oh, here's, SEC and Big 10 leaders are going to meet. I said, look, what they're doing is they're meeting about trying to basically cut everybody else out, take 4 automatic playoff bids apiece, do a non-conference scheduling agreement so that the Big 10 or the ACC, it would make it virtually impossible to play any of their teams, kind of rig strength of schedule, get even more at-large teams in there. Bam. That's what you can find in Open for Business. Anyway, Ed says, if the SEC and Big 10 want 4 slots each, the playoff should expand to 16 teams. They get their 8 combined slots. ACC and Big 12 get 3 each. 1 slot for G5, 1 for independent or at-large. That's a win for the Big 12 or the ACC. If I were the Big 12 or ACC, I would rather have the SEC or Big 10 limited to 4 slots than have one of them get 6 or 8 and the Big 12 stuck with 1. Give them what you want, but you get more than you expect. Well, it's not like the end of the world if they get 4 spots. It does just reek of greed and like, why do you need that? So I'm not completely melting down over that idea in singularity. It's more the fact that just like every move seems to be made toward like rigging the system, like setting it up. I think the non-conference, like the scheduling agreement piece is a huge piece of this and something that I really hate with it. And we'll get even less and less of like cool non-conference games because they'll just shut it down by trying to schedule it themselves. It's another way to cut everybody else out. So I don't love that. Now, as for your the theory to expand to 16, I mean, like that would be great. The theory right now is that the 4 automatic bids for each league would occur with a 14-team playoff. But the problem is if you are the Big 10 or the ACC or the Big 12 rather, or the ACC, you don't have any leverage. The Big 10 and the SEC are calling all the shots. If they were to expand to 16, I guarantee you we'd start to hear about 5 automatic bids for the Big 10 or the SEC. So that is the problem. That is the problem, that you just don't have any leverage. You're basically along for the ride here. if it does wind up in, 2 auto bids for the Big 12 and ACC, it's like I said, again, not the worst thing in the world. And so I guess kind of to your point there, hey, at least you're getting more than what you expect. There is an element of that, but the bigger picture here, I think, is what the real issue is. Ed also said, during the next round of Power 4 realignment around 2030, as ACC brands move to the Power 2 and probably Big 12, the top 3 power conferences have 20-plus teams. You will probably see a return to divisions. All conferences will play at least 9 conference games, but most, if not all, will go to 10. Yeah, I could see all that stuff happening for sure. You'll have to do something. If you're getting to 20-plus teams, you'll have to do something. And you're almost at that point now with how many teams are in all of these leagues, because it's going to get messy. That will be another storyline for the end of the year, but people are going to be very upset and frustrated with tiebreakers and how all that breaks down and unbalanced schedules. We're already seeing just a lot of that this year, with schedules looking different than they did at the beginning of the year. And then, by the time you get to the end, you'll be like, oh, well, Team X got a really, really easy draw here. Team Y did not. That's not fair. Why, in a tiebreaker scenario, well, they played a much easier schedule. We'll get a lot of that. Anyway, Ed, I apologize, not able to read like the entire thing that you sent me there, but I appreciate your thoughts and appreciate you contributing. Same to my friend Polly. Appreciate you, Polly. Thank you for your contribution as well to the Venmo, John-Kurtz-4 at Venmo. So thank you very much to everybody there, as well as Daniel. Thank you, Daniel, Cat fan in Huskerland, a.k.a. Daniel Osborne. Daniel says, how about Vandy? How about Vandy indeed? Such a great piece of the sport, man. Like literally history. I was sitting there thinking, this is historical. In fact, I saw Lane Kiffin at his press conference. He was doing his post-game press conference, and he said the same thing. He said literally, like, you'll probably never see that again in your life. So, like, I need to watch this. Sorry. He was kind of apologizing for looking up at the TV as opposed to answering the question at the press conference. And I agree with him, man. That's once in a lifetime stuff that we got to see there with Diego Pavia and Bama. I guess maybe I shouldn't put that, if Clark Lee is going to continue to make Vandy better, hell, they almost won at Mizzou and then did that to Bama. So maybe there's something to that. Maybe Clark Lee will have a James Franklin-esque run at Vandy and they will become more salty, but it certainly feels pretty once in a lifetime. And that leads me into the main point tonight. What an incredible weekend. And just display of everything in the sport. Number 1 went down. Number 4 went down. Number 9 went down. Number 10 went down. Number 11 went down. Number 8 escaped by the skin of the ACC officiating crew for a second straight week, or else we would have had number 8 going down too, with Miami at Cal. Clearly a man downfield on that touchdown that they got at the end of the game there. I mean, look, Cal needs to hold on to a 35-10 lead. So there's plenty of blame to go around on Cal's side, but I hated to see how that ended. It's just a week after, Miami gets about as lucky as you can possibly get on the call with Virginia Tech and the Hail Mary. But this isn't even just about what happened on the field. I mean, I yearn for the days, and I miss the days. It's easy to forget the days when College GameDay was still appointment viewing for me. It has not been for a long time. Some of that is maybe the show just runs its course after a while, but it just felt like it became less about like, hey, let's preview all of the big games. Felt like it became a little less equitable in terms of the amount of coverage for all the different conferences. Surprise, surprise. And it just was not as fun. It was not as fun to me. I know they brought Pat McAfee in to try and recoup some of that. Maybe it's worked for some people. Still has not really for me. It's been a long time since I really wanted to tune in every single Saturday. And for a long time, that's what you did at 9:00. You flipped that on. The Cal scene there really reminded me of those days. They pick a really out of left field is maybe a bit strong, but they pick an unorthodox game and an unorthodox spot for College GameDay that they wouldn't typically pick. Cal had not ever had it before. and this sleepy little fan base. I'm guilty of it myself. If you guys have been on the channel for a while, you remember it was not that long ago. I mean, a handful of months ago, when I was like making Cal jokes on here because we had a Cal fan in who was, I don't know, upset or trying to poke and prod. And I was like, irrelevant program. Like, what is Cal? Cal has shown up not only with the Calgorithm on social media, but with a sea of people there, students that got there really early. They had hilarious signs. They turned that Coke versus woke thing into such an incredible meme, and just the signs that were coming along with that were amazing. So kudos to Cal, man. And that's when you go somewhere you haven't been, when you go somewhere that's not Ohio State, Bama, Georgia, Texas, Oklahoma, you get stuff like that. You get the best of the sport. And that was the best of the sport. So I absolutely loved to see that from College GameDay. And that is your first reminder that, like, hey, they're trying to take that away from you. Basically, they're trying to take that away from you. They are trying to take away any attention to anything that is not, particularly for ESPN, based in the SEC. I know a lot of people have pointed out an article from ESPN recapping the weekend where they were much harsher in grading Ohio State than they were Georgia for their performances on Saturday, and pointing out, like, well, that sure seems to be like some SEC bias. Yes, there's plenty of that there at ESPN, but they also are partial to the Big Ten too, certainly more than the Big 12 and ACC. They decided to throw the ACC a bone. Look what happens. It was awesome. All the way down to like Marshawn Lynch. Great guests, great, fun, creative guests that you could have there. Remember, Big 12 fans certainly will, when College GameDay went to Lawrence, Kansas 2 years ago. Ton of people showed up. It was an awesome scene. It was kind of an event. It made you want to watch, to see what that would be like, going to a place that they had never been before. And it turned in the highest number of viewers for a pre-November College GameDay show in 12 years when they did that. It got a great response. You would hope that these things like start to click, start to register. Hey, this is the fabric of the sport. This is why everybody loves this, because it's not sterile and it's not the NFL and it's so much more unpredictable. And there are zany traditions, and college students. Hell, we even had the kid kicking the field goal where he won, what was it, like $7,000 or seven, I think it was $70,000, but he got to keep 10 and someone went to charity. It hits like a 30-yard field goal. Like, that was great. You get to see the personality of the sport on full display there. It was amazing. So I'm so glad ESPN did that. Hopefully that registers for somebody. I keep just thinking, it's like at some point, will somebody step up, somebody that has some actual clout or power step up and be a force for greater good for the sport? Or are we just going to keep rolling down this Big Ten and SEC hill, this Super League hill, to kill the personality of the sport, sterilize it, make it only about the biggest of the big brands, and eventually that will produce diminishing returns for everybody down the road, even those that think they're benefiting from the short-term cash grab. I digress. Many of those that think they'd be benefiting from the short-term cash grab of that got their asses kicked on Saturday, got embarrassed on Saturday, starting with, as Daniel mentioned, Vandy, who really controlled that game like wire to wire. That did not feel very fluky. That did not feel very fluky from Vandy. Incredible to see them do that. Diego Pavia is like one of the best stories, I feel like, in college football in a while. The guy, I'm forgetting the specific stat. The guy, 100, you guys are telling me $100,000. Okay, my bad. The guy has beaten Auburn as a double-digit underdog with New Mexico State. Now he's beating Alabama as a double-digit underdog with Vandy. His playing style is so damn fun, easy to root for. He had the incredible interview after the game, which, again, college football, that's what you've got, a guy thanking God and then the next second dropping an F-bomb in a post-game interview. Like, it doesn't, I mean, just doesn't get more college football than that. And Vandy, I realize, is in the SEC, right? That was not a Big 12 or an ACC team beating Alabama. That was not like Washington State, Oregon State, one of the two left behind schools from the Pac-12 beating Alabama. But it was the very first school that would always get brought up when the question turns to, all right, well, at what point are these SEC and Big Ten schools just going to cut everybody out? They're going to cut the crap at the bottom and get rid of it and just roll with the stuff at the top. Vandy would be first on that list. So as much as it feels like they're not necessarily a part of all the stuff that's happened lately in college football, they actually kind of are, because people view them as being on the chopping block there. And if it did get to Super League time with 20 schools, 30 schools, 40 schools, whatever, I don't know that a lot of people have Vandy being included in that. So they are still sort of in that group. Now, Cal didn't finish the deal, but I'm still going to include Cal in this. They built a 35-10 lead on Miami. They got College GameDay. They made a tremendous show of it. And Cal is a school that now is having to do this wild cross-country travel thing by being more or less relegated to the ACC from the Pac-12. Cal is very much involved in the tier of schools here that have been screwed by the landscape of the sport, the greed of the sport, the greed at the top by the SEC, Big Ten, and the TV networks. And they got to make a show of it on Saturday. And definitely did get hosed. I see you, chat. They definitely did get hosed. You've got Minnesota over USC. Minnesota is, I suppose, maybe a borderline school if you're talking about a Super League that's going to like 35, 40 teams. They just feel like a somewhat forgotten team in the Big Ten. You don't hear a whole lot about them. They are a big fan base, good tradition, very proud fan base. But they're in that same sort of tier that, hey, if the Big Ten stays intact, they're going to be fine. If you go to some sort of a Super League, I don't know. Maybe then you start to wonder a bit. They got a moment by beating USC. USC, by the way, school that played one of the most major and pivotal roles in the crazy, insane realignment that we saw over the last 3 years, because they were the driving force between wanting to get out of the Pac-12, made that happen. Now here they are, having to go travel across 2 time zones. And what happens? They take an L. Losing to Minnesota. So there's just a lot there, man. This is what makes college football amazing. And the more that you just condense the top of the sport, and you won't have Cal's playing in Miami, you won't have Vandy's playing in Alabama, maybe you wouldn't have a Minnesota playing a USC, and instead just every week it's going to be USC against Penn State or Georgia or Bama or Michigan, you will lose that. You will lose a lot of the charm with that. I just don't think people, I guess, have thought it through or care. It's probably more just care, but I would profess that they need to think this through a little bit. The way the sport is moving, you're going to get less and less of this, less and less of what actually happened on Saturday. I think one other thing I would point out here, I know it's easy to be, if you're a Big 12 fan or honestly even an ACC fan at this point, because Miami looks so damn vulnerable, pessimistic about the chances that your league gets a win in the playoff this year. And that's the only way to stack legitimate respect up against the Power 2 conferences right now, is just to go beat them in the college football playoff. This is the type of Saturday that will open you back up a little bit and be like, all right, maybe we shouldn't just write that off. I know that the Big 12 is just a convoluted mess right now, and it's really hard to make sense of who's good, who's not. Is anybody good? We don't know. But I would imagine the Big 12 champ is going to be better than Vandy. And I know transitive property, I'm not trying to do that whole thing. Yeah, you're going to get a more focused Bama in a 4-5 playoff game than you would Bama at Vandy the week after beating Georgia. I understand that. But I also would say that the Big 12 champ is probably going to be considerably better than Vandy. And if Bama is capable of putting bad football out there for long stretches of time like that, could happen in a playoff game. Who had TCU beating Michigan, for instance, a couple of years ago? We already did see that. And Michigan goes on to win the national championship the next year. Like, don't abandon hope here. This showed some vulnerabilities, and basically everybody except, who hasn't shown a vulnerability yet? I suppose Texas. They haven't had like Georgia or Oklahoma. I don't know that Oklahoma's really that much of a test. It's a joke, by the way, that Oklahoma is ranked 18th in the country. But it'll look good for the big Saturday that they've got coming up. It'll look good for TV when you can flash up those numbers and the graphic about all the games that we have, which it will be an awesome week of games on paper. Anyway, Texas has not really been pushed yet. Ohio State has not really been pushed yet, but I don't know that they don't inspire a ton of confidence to me that they're more infallible than the rest of this group. Like, everybody has shown warts and weaknesses, which is a good thing when you think about what the playoff could wind up being if you're a Big 12 or an ACC fan. And I would tie that into like Bill Connolly from ESPN, who has been talking about 2007 a lot. Okay. 2007 was one of the wildest years in college football history, if not the wildest year in like modern college football history. I mean, like you had South Florida in the top 10. You had Kansas with an undefeated regular season. Rutgers was very good in 2007. Like you had some weird stuff going on, and there were upsets all over the place. A very topsy-turvy year. Again, the best of college football. That is the best of college football. It is what makes it unique and what makes it so great. And so Bill Connolly has been drawing a lot of comparisons to 2007 based on what we've been seeing right now. And he brought up this point. You have 8 top 10 teams so far this year that have lost to unranked opponents. Okay, 8 top 10 teams have lost to unranked opponents. At this point in 2007, 9. You had 9. So you're almost on that 2007 pace. We are almost on that pace for that crazy of a college football year. And the crazier it gets, I know in Big 12 country right now, it's easy to kind of be self-deprecating about it and be like, well, it's crazy in the league, but it's not really a great thing because it means we don't have a standout team. Like Utah, for instance, I'll talk more about this later. Their resume sure is not aged very well. Does not look like Utah is some infallible team that everybody trusts as like a top 10 team at the top of the league. So that pulls away from having a team that everybody would like really trust up there. There are flaws everywhere, but the more that everybody else shows flaws and that this is a crazy year with insane upsets, better chance that one of those happens in the playoff. Better chance that one of those happens in the playoff, for sure. So you want this to be as much a shades of 2007 type of year as you possibly can. I think one other thing I would point out about this weekend and what we may be seeing right now in football, speaking of realignment, speaking of the changing dynamics of the sport, great stat, courtesy of John Wilner. Big 10 teams are 1-8 when traveling across 2 time zones in league play. USC, Minnesota, a prime example of that. Big 10 teams are 1-8 when traveling across 2 time zones in league play. It's not easy. And that is going to be something that teams will figure out and have to deal with. I can feel, honestly, West Virginia fans like screaming through their TV screen or if you're watching it on TV, your computer screen, your phone, screaming at the screen right now, being like, yeah, we know. We've been doing this for over a decade now in the Big 12, where we're the one school that has to travel across time zones and, do more travel than anybody else. And it wears on you and it's tough. I get it. That does deserve some level of empathy or sympathy, however you'd want to phrase it, from other schools in the Big 12, because it is true. West Virginia has had to do that. I do think this is a type of trend that we'll continue to see. Honestly, like a team like K-State. Look, K-State has already gone to BYU. You saw how that worked. They had to play a late night time slot and go play in a different time zone and the altitude. Now they're about to go back-to-back road trips to Colorado. Altitude, different time zone, late kick. And then they're going to go to West Virginia the next week, all the way in the Eastern time zone. We'll see what is going to be for a kick time for that game, but you get the point. It's not easy. And I think we'll see that be more and more of a factor. And it's going to lead to major fan bases being pretty unhappy. The more the Big Ten and the SEC get loaded up, and then you have these weird scheduling travel quirks, you're going to have power schools losing more games and becoming more upset. Like USC fans, for instance, they're upset. That's a game that, if not for that whole scenario, maybe they don't lose to Minnesota. They've already got a couple of losses this year. Even after the LSU win, I think USC fans are not feeling so great. Speaking of LSU fans, not been a great year necessarily for LSU. I don't know that they're feeling great right now. Oklahoma, again, a joke that they're ranked in the top 20. I think that's going to be a rough year for them, like a 7-5 type of season in the SEC. It's not going to make Oklahoma fans happy. Florida State, completely down in the dumps. Michigan, upset. Like Auburn, can you imagine being an Auburn fan right now? You'll just have more and more of these fan bases that are going to get upset because they're running into difficult situations and more difficult teams in their league. That's another thing to keep your eye on as we move through the new era of college football. So anyway, to punctuate it, that was great for the little guy. That was great for anybody who's not one of the top 5 to 10 brands in college football. And even then, if you are one of the top 5 to 10 brands, even if it was your team that lost, even if you're an Alabama fan, I'm sure none of them would want to hear it from me, but deep down, they know that was awesome to watch. And that weekend was incredible. And that's why we all watch this sport. It's not perfect, but it provides a lot of great things like this weekend. Okay, what's up, Eddie? Hello, Eddie. Thank you for being here. If you want to be a part of the show, click that $ below the chat box. Create a super chat. It will guarantee that you make it on the show tonight. I've got a couple of those to run through here. Great way to support the channel as well. And those of you that are coming in from Twitter, of which we have almost 1,000 here joining us from Twitter tonight. I appreciate all of you guys. One, if you migrate over to the YouTube channel, John Kurtz, just my name on YouTube, you can check out all the live streams, all the content that I put up there. There is much, much more. If you're a Big 12 fan, if you're a college football fan, make sure to check it out and subscribe while you are there so you don't miss anything. But also, make sure you get signed up for my Open for Business Big 12 newsletter. If you want to cut through the Big 10 and the SEC crap and just get Big 12 news straight to your inbox multiple times a week for free, ofbnews.com is how you get signed up for the Open for Business newsletter. That is ofbnews.com. There's also a link in the description of the video. So if you're watching on YouTube, you can just go click the link in the description of the video as well. So Eddie, what's up, Eddie? Thank you for being here. Eddie says, hey, buddy, crazy week. TCU Baylor needs new coach. Yeah, who would you rather be right now, TCU or Baylor? Sheesh. I mean, I guess TCU is a little more entertaining to watch most of the time because of Josh Hoover, but that was not really the case on Friday. Both pretty down bad right now. Both had great seasons in 21 and 22, and now very much down in the dumps. Congrats to Arizona State, Houston, Texas Tech, Iowa State. UCF was disappointing. No kidding. UCF, unbelievably disappointing. I know you don't need me to scold you, UCF fans or Gus Malzahn or anybody, but that was a big letdown. Big letdown for the league. To go lose that game, it falls into sort of the same category as West Virginia, Penn State. Not a good showing at all. Not a good showing. Props to SMU. They may be an ACC contender. Yeah, that sucks for Big 12 fans. That sucks. But SMU does look like they may be an ACC contender. I'll tell you who it's great for, though, is BYU. Man, that resume looking pretty good for the Cougars right now. That is aging like a fine wine right now, with K-State back on its feet and SMU playing very well. I do not watch College GameDay anymore. Too SEC centric. Yep. I think SEC TMS should fall more. SEC teams should fall more in the rankings. Yeah, I saw Bama dropped to like 7. I mean, Mizzou, goodness gracious, Mizzou. I watched a lot of that game. Not competitive for a second. And they had a lot working against them. Namely, officiating was not great there. Tiger fans, I'll level with you on that, but. Yeah, if that's a Big 12 team, they may be down at 24 instead of 19. So Mizzou probably catches a break with the 3 letters on the side of the helmet there. They probably do, to be honest. So appreciate it, Eddie. Thank you for your thoughts as always. Thank you for the email this week. Great to hear from you, and thank you for being such a great supporter. Same to you, Michael. Appreciate you, Michael. I see a couple here from Michael. Michael says, let's go SMU, win the ACC. There we go. Like I said, BYU's got to be loving the way that SMU is playing right now. Michael, a great Coug fan. SMU at 25 is criminal. I mean, that was a great win that they had, man. Beating Louisville at Louisville is a really nice win. And computers, a lot of people have really been loving the Cardinal. So, yeah, no salt here from me. I mean, SMU Twitter can be a bit annoying, but the team has earned it this year. Made a quarterback change, and that team has really earned it. Michael also says K-State BYU Big 12 championship game rematch, another game together. Hey, I would love it. I would love to see K-State BYU in Arlington. Let's hope. Let's hope, man. Your lips to God's ears. Let's hope. I know not everybody here is hoping for that, but if we were handicapping top 4 teams to get there, I guess I'd go BYU, Iowa State. Maybe I'm too much a slave to the preseason expectations, but I guess I would still hold out hope for Cam Rising coming back and Utah, K-State, rounding out the 4. But we've got a really wide open discussion as far as that is concerned, which I will get to later on in the show. Nate, what's up, Nate? John, how do you feel with later game times for the Big 12 this week and next? Yeah, I don't like that there's not anything in that 11 a.m. window just for from a selfish standpoint. Like this weekend, I was like, that's why I watched Mizzou, Texas A&M so intently. I was just like, there's just not the whole hell of a lot going on. But yeah, you don't have anything in the 11 a.m. window. You've got BYU, Arizona at 3 on Fox, which shout out to the Cougs for getting big noon kickoff. Thrilled for that. That will be a great display, and it's an awesome atmosphere. So I'm excited for BYU to get that. Cincy at UCF. It's also at 2:30. But then everything else, Iowa State, West Virginia, sneaky, very good game. Iowa State only a 3-point favorite. That's at 7. Then you've got the late night Big 12 after dark, K-State, Colorado, and you got a Friday game that kicks at 9:30 Central Time between Utah and Arizona State. So. Yeah, it is not, selfishly, Nate, it is not very conducive to me at all. I'm very much an early to bed, early to rise kind of a guy these days. So it's hard for me to stay up. But, I try. And along the same lines, Eddie chiming back in. Appreciate you, Nate. Appreciate you, Eddie. Eddie says, Big 12 after dark is tough. I fell asleep midway through the third quarter on the Arizona versus Texas Tech game. To those that have not signed on, the newsletter is a great read. Thank you, Eddie. That is a personal recommendation there from Eddie to sign up at ofbnews.com for the Open for Business newsletter. Join nearly 2,500 other Big 12 fans who are currently reading it. Appreciate you, Eddie. Thank you very much. Totally with you. I actually will say I got kind of lucky this week, and my sister's wedding was this weekend, or it was a renewal of vows from last year, but basically the big wedding celebration. And so I was up late, way later than I normally would be on a Saturday. So I actually did get to catch the end of Arizona Texas Tech live before going and catching up on the rest today. Well, Texas Tech looked like a mess early on in the year, but they're dodging the Big 12 absolute mess segment here. Self-proclaimed, that's what I'm deciding to call it, because we have a lot of teams that just appear to be really messy situations right now. Now, there are some obvious ones. Kansas, Baylor, I guess, like outside looking in as far as getting a lot of run in this segment for a couple of different reasons. For Kansas, is because, they lost 4 straight before that game. I don't know that really changes much with them. There's already been a lot of discussion about that. They continue to lose games in like the exact same way. I feel like I've watched the Kansas losing a football game movie 5 different times now. They scored late. They got ahead. It feels like they should win. And then they let Arizona State march right back down the field and score the go-ahead and game-winning touchdown. It is what it is. That's what Kansas is right now. They're just not a good team. They can't find a way to finish any games, whether it's the defense letting them down or the offense letting them down or special teams in the TCU game. Like every phase of the football is letting them down. So it is what it is on Kansas. Baylor, it does feel like Baylor's just kind of doomed at this point. Ever since that ball left Shador's hand in Boulder, it's been really all downhill there for Aranda. I mean, they're spunky, like they've got some fight. They jumped out 14-3 on Iowa State, but it just never really felt like they were really shutting down Iowa State or stopping them. Clones kind of moved the ball, and when they didn't get in their own way, they punched it in and scored. And Baylor definitely did not have enough firepower there. It's hard to see Aranda doing much to at least get Baylor fans excited. I guess I don't know ultimately if it'll mean that he's fired or not, but it's hard to see him doing enough to get fans excited. Both of those, I guess, just feel like they're already sort of resigned to their fate. For Kansas, this season is not going to be a success. For Baylor, Dave Aranda era may be coming to an end. The three I want to focus in on, though, are Oklahoma State, TCU, and UCF. Man, Oklahoma State, dude, this feels like, to be honest, this conference season for Oklahoma State feels like what we expected last year. Because remember last year, Mike Gundy has this tumultuous offseason where there's all this talk about NIL and is Gundy embracing NIL enough? The Spencer Sanders situation happens where he leaves and goes to Ole Miss. You lose Trace Ford to Oklahoma. It feels like there are players leaving left and right. And Oklahoma State fans, rightfully so, I think were pretty alarmed. They were freaking out about this. Then you start the season, they're rotating three quarterbacks, one of whom had the last name Gundy and is now playing at Emporia State. You're rotating three quarterbacks. Nothing's going right. You lose by 26 at home to South Alabama. And at that point, feels like everybody's ready to just write off the Gundy era. This thing's done. Game's passed him by. And then you would have expected this type of conference performance, right? You would have expected at that point an 0-3 start to league play where you're getting drilled at home by West Virginia. That's what you would have expected to come last year. Instead, what happened last year is that Ollie Gordon emerged as a total superstar, and Oklahoma State went on to make the Big 12 championship game. And they pieced it together, and everybody who had doubted Gundy looked quite silly. And then Oklahoma State had a great offseason this year. They retained Ollie Gordon. They bring back virtually the entire roster. I guess in hindsight, you could say maybe it was a bad thing that Alan Bowman returned at quarterback, but it sure seemed like there was a lot of continuity, a lot of reason to be excited about the Pokes this offseason. And now it's coming off the rails. I mean, it's coming undone. They have been completely controlled at home by Utah with a true freshman backup quarterback. They got mauled in Manhattan. You know, it's 42-13 before a garbage time touchdown. And then West Virginia's doing whatever it is that they want to them in Stillwater. 31-7 at half in Stillwater? Like, are you kidding me? And credit West Virginia. I mean, Garrett Green's making plays. When he is playing well, he is one of the most fun players to watch in the conference. So shout out to Garrett Green. Shout out to Nico, too, who had some nice moments in relief for a bit there. But that can't be happening if you are Mike Gundy in Oklahoma State. Like, what is going on there? And I can't shake this feeling that, like, we're sitting here talking about, and we'll talk about TCU in a moment, sitting here talking about Sonny Dykes, like, hey, 2022 feels like this total fluke, kind of blip on the radar. Like, how did that happen? In the greater context of where Mike Gundy, where his era is going, was last year just a bit fluky? Was the conference season last year just a bit fluky? And really, this is more of the trend. Bad offseason, bad non-con, great conference season, but now pretty bad season in general. If they had lost that Arkansas game, and we're sitting here talking about them being at 2-4, and it was that close. So that would be my fear here. I guess I'll put it that way. That would be my fear here. And I'm speaking as somebody who's now had my trust kind of broken by Mike Gundy. I had a lot of trust there with him. I gave him the benefit of the doubt going into this weekend's matchup against West Virginia. And now I feel like the trust has been broken. Trust has been broken. We'll see. Is Mike Gundy going to want to keep pushing forward with this? I don't know. It doesn't seem like he's real thrilled with his quarterback room because they won't play Zane Flores. They're sticking with Garrett Rangel or Alan Bowman, so the cupboard feels kind of dry there. They're probably going to need to go fish for a big-name quarterback in the portal this offseason. And we've heard those whispers about NIL. They stepped up and paid Ollie Gordon, so we'll see. We'll see. But is that something that Mike Gundy is going to want to do? Be interesting. Be interesting to see how that plays out. TCU. 8-12 record since beating Michigan in the playoff. And of those 8 wins, only one of them is against a Power 4 team with a winning record. One. That was SMU last year. That is the only win over a Power 4 team with a winning record that Sonny Dykes has had at TCU since he beat Michigan in the college football playoff in 2022. That's not good. The Horned Frogs, they're just a mess. I have not once watched TCU since then and thought, man, that's a pretty well-coached team. There's none of that. Feels like all of that, like just the edge, the toughness, the grit, all of that left the building when Max Duggan walked out of there. Doesn't feel like there's any of that left. It's not like there's no talent. If you go look at the 24/7 talent composite, TCU has the number one roster in the Big 12. There's no excuse from a talent standpoint. They have the number one roster in the Big 12. And what that talent composite does, it takes everybody on your roster, breaks them out to what they were as high school recruits, whether you got them in the portal or pulled them in out of high school, and it shows 5-star, 4-star, 3-star. TCU's got the best overall collection of talent. They have the second most 5-star players in the league behind just Colorado. They should be better than this. There's no excuse to be this bad. Not just losing at home to Houston, who had not scored in 2 entire Big 12 games, but even I continue to go back to that SMU game, which was just an embarrassment with how sloppy they were all over the place, and Sonny's getting kicked out of the game. I like Sonny Dykes, the guy. He's a nice guy. Enjoyed chatting with him at Big 12 Media Days this year. But you can't be doing this at TCU. There's too much talent there. That program has too high a ceiling. It should be one of the best programs in this new league, full stop. And it's bad. And it's hard to shake the notion for Sonny Dykes right now that, once Gary Patterson's players left, it's been kind of a train wreck. So fair to question that. Big time fair to question that. How patient will Jeremiah Donati and TCU be? I don't know. Seems like a lot of consternation among TCU fans right now, which completely fair. Totally and completely fair. UCF, I said this earlier, UCF, the most personally disappointing to me here. And I say that as someone who picked Oklahoma State to win the league, and now they're obviously letting me down and making me look silly. But I loved UCF's potential. I love the roster. They have the number 5 roster in the conference in terms of the talent composite, but they do have the second highest number of 4-star players on the roster of anybody in the league. They have 20. Meanwhile, you look at a team like K-State, pretty highly thought of, great program. They have 8. UCF has 20. So there's talent on the UCF roster. We know how good RJ Harvey is. They went out and got a high-profile quarterback in KJ Jefferson out of the portal. Now, unfortunately, that's not looking great. You see Arkansas, Taylon Green, wildly erratic, but wildly talented. I don't think Arkansas would be trading that right now. And, KJ Jefferson with RJ Harvey, it just has not been a consistent enough answer for the Knights. And it's not only that I was high on them, believed in their potential, like Gus Malzahn as a head coach. I think it's underrated the job that he did at Auburn, especially seeing how how those that have come after him have now done. That's an impressive job that he did there, but this isn't working, man. And you just blew 2 massive opportunities. Like just 2 weeks ago, you've got Josh Pate hyping you up big time on the biggest digital college football enterprise that's going right now. Big noon kickoffs rolling into town for your matchup with Coach Prime. And you're thinking, all right, we'll show Colorado how this goes. They just had to play their guts out to win on a Hail Mary. They're going to travel across multiple time zones. Remember that multiple time zone stat? Everybody in the Big Ten, 1 and 8, going across 2 time zones. Colorado going across 2 time zones to play at UCF. And it's like, all right, well, we can launch the RJ Harvey Heisman campaign here. We're going to show off how awesome our fan support is, which they did do that. Can't take that away from them. They did do that. Great showing at Big Noon Kickoff. But then it's like, all right, we'll have basically double the big game audience that we would have at least with Colorado here. You're going to do 3 or 4 million in terms of that viewership number when Colorado plays. That's the way this goes. All those eyeballs can be on us, and we'll show them why RJ Harvey's the real star in this game. And boy, you lost by 4 touchdowns. And then the next week, hey, this is an SEC matchup. You can put the final nail in the Billy Napier coffin. You can laugh at Florida, go into Florida where, you're not getting very many cracks at Florida, Florida State, Miami in the state. You want to really show like, hey, we're Power 4 now. You need to respect us. Stop making fun of us. And you just go in and get controlled by Florida's worst team in a long time. At least one of the worst Florida teams in a while. A team that, Florida fans are completely checked out on. They controlled the game. Never felt like UCF was really in that game. Never. Not for a second. It's so disappointing, man. So disappointing. Instead of, hey, back-to-back weeks where we can show everybody how awesome we are, get like 3 times the viewership for our game against Dion that we normally would, show off our star, and then next week go embarrass Florida in the swamp and do a favor, do a solid for the Big 12 by picking up a win over the SEC on the road. Did none of it. None of it. None of it. Didn't come close in either game. Double-digit losses, back-to-back weeks. There are also now 5 players who have decided to redshirt and leave early and do the transfer thing out of UCF. Feels messy there. Feels messy there. Gus, I love you, but got to get something working. You got to turn that around somehow. And I can feel and sense the UCF frustration there big time. So I feel for you, UCF fans. I do. Okay. Got about 10 more minutes here. I'm going to hit a couple more super chats before we just check the Big 12 title race before exiting today, because it continues to fluctuate like crazy week by week. But let's say hello to Papa Bravo. I appreciate you, Papa Bravo. If, by the way, you want to be a part of the show like this, the way to guarantee it, one, if you're on Twitter, is to watch on YouTube, John Kurtz on YouTube, to catch the live stream there and catch all the other content that I'm posting throughout the week. You want more of this, you like this, you're going to get a lot more if you subscribe to the channel. And then if you come in here, click the $ below the chat box to submit a super chat. It will guarantee that you make it on the show tonight. That's the way to do that. Would also appreciate it if you subscribe to the Eddie Lozano endorsed Big 12 newsletter, Open for Business, ofbnews.com, ofbnews.com, to get signed up for Open for Business. No Big 10 or SEC bias, straight Big 12 news to your inbox, 2,500 plus. Signed up already. All right, Papa Bravo. I wondered how many former Pac-12 school presidents are thinking maybe we should have given that Apple deal a shot when they're flying to Rutgers. I definitely get what you're saying, and maybe they are. I don't know that the Apple deal is really like, maybe we should have just stuck around and tried this very risky deal that was not anywhere near what was actually promised to us by George Kliavkoff. I think a lot of that's just like leadership breakdown. The decisions that were made were kind of the ones that had to be made based on the way everything had started to unfold there. But point taken, I'm sure they're like, hey, maybe we should have put more effort into making this league stronger, not empowering Larry Scott the way that we did. Like, lots of mistakes that were made in the past. I'm sure they're thinking that. I'm sure they are thinking that. I mean, especially like this year, you go do that, like Rutgers will beat you. Rutgers is pretty feisty this year. They would definitely beat you. So, yeah. Those cross-country flights where you're going across multiple time zones to get beat, those plane rides back, I'm sure there are a lot of thoughts flying through people's minds. So that's a good point, Papa Bravo. I appreciate you, man. Nate, what's up, Nate? All right, Nate's giving me his top 5 in the Big 12. He's got 1 BYU, 2 Iowa State, 3 K-State, 4 Utah, 5 Colorado. What do you think? I have not actually done my power rankings yet at this point. I can't argue too much with your 1 and 2. If I were being honest, and Nate, I can see you're an Iowa State fan, I would probably flip-flop them and go Iowa State 1, BYU 2. That's almost more of an eye test thing than it is actual resume, because as great as the win at Iowa is, BYU's now got that win that's aging very well over SMU. That was on the road. They also beat down K-State 38-9. So the BYU resume has probably honestly aged to a point where if you're going based on just solely meritocracy, BYU should be number 1. I feel like when I watch the two teams, Iowa State has a bit more upside. And I know those of you that have been listening all year are like, upside, John. You were talking about, well, Matt Campbell is the king of the anti-upside there. He's got a high floor, not a high enough ceiling. And yes, you are correct. But Iowa State has been impressive. They've been impressive. So I would flip-flop those two. I think K-State at 3 is fine. I wouldn't have a problem with K-State at 3 or Utah at 3. I'd have to really think about that one, because so much of it just hinges on like, what are we getting Cam Rising back? Are we just doing this thing again, just like last year? He's never going to play again. It's a Rising based. If I knew that they were getting Rising back, I'd slide them in front of K-State. 5 Colorado. I wouldn't argue too hard. Let me see. I'm going to go bring up our Big 12 standings here just to make sure that I'm not leaving somebody out, because it's always very easy to do. Now there's so many teams in the league. 5, Colorado. I mean, you're talking about like West Virginia and Texas Tech. Would I have Colorado above West Virginia and Texas Tech? I mean, they had a Hail Mary win to beat Baylor. It's like, how do you judge that versus going and pummeling UCF on the road? It's hard. How do you parse those three, man? I mean, I'm just reacting in real time with all of you guys. Because of upside, I think Colorado has the highest upside because of the star power they have on that team. I'm fine with going Colorado 5. So I think you've got a pretty good list, Nate. As you can see, like I have no strong arguments against a lot of that. So appreciate you, my friend. Rob, what's up, Rob? Which running back scammed their fans the most for NIL? Ollie Gordon, Abu Sama, or Devin Neal? DJ Kittens and Taj Brooks are the class of the conference. Well, let's not slander Devin Neal. Devin Neal is one of my favorite players to watch in the conference. He is very good. I think he is the least of Kansas's problems. Let's go, Devin Neal. So if you're going to say, well, we paid this guy all this NIL and they're not winning. I mean, he's averaging 6 yards a carry, 5.8 yards a carry, 584 yards and 5 touchdowns in 6 games, almost 100 yards a game. He's great. He's great. As Brian Haney would say, a real deal. I mean, he is the real deal. So I just saying that. I know he plays for Kansas. You would think wouldn't be a big Devin Neal fan. I am a big Devin Neal fan. What has Abu Sama done? I mean, I know the other kid, little shifty kid that had a really nice game, and Tim Brando was just losing his mind about. Okay, yeah, Abu Sama 48 for 242. I can maybe a little bit, but the team's 5-0. That's the problem there with Sama too. It's like he is contributing and the team is 5-0, so like who really cares? Jalen Jackson. My fault there. Jalen Jackson's leading the team in rushing. He's got 295, and then they also have Carson Hansen. So it's more running back by committee right now. Hey, as long as they're winning, no one's going to care all that much. Now, Ollie Gordon, oh boy. That's an element of the situation at those places that I deemed messes in the league that I haven't really talked about. I mean, you are going to have tough conversations and a lot of problems dealing with a lot of people who are going to be very upset about the money that they're dumping into that. 3.8 yards a carry, 384 yards through 5 games for Ollie Gordon. That ain't going to cut it. So you'll have people that are very upset about that. DJ Giddens, Taj Brooks, and I'm going to go ahead and throw RJ Harvey in there. Maybe, Cam Scattaboo. Should probably pay attention to him too. But I think if you put Harvey in there, those 3 have all been very, very good. DJ Giddens just flying so, I know I'm a K-State guy, blah, 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 but flying so under the radar with that stuff. DJ Giddens has been phenomenal this year. And so is Taj Brooks, and Texas Tech has not lost a game that he has played in this year. Eddie, what's up, Eddie? Eddie says, I like Coach Dykes. He and Aranda do not fire up the teams. Being a leader requires you to inspire these young men to play up to or beyond capability. That's actually, I think, a pretty solid observation. Like, they are not rah-rah, fire brimstone guys or like dynamic personalities by any stretch of the imagination. Aranda, totally quiet, Zen master sort of guy. Sonny Dykes, just a little bit more like soft-spoken. So I think you're fair to make that distinction and that observation with those guys right now. It's probably not helping them. Now, it also didn't matter when they were winning a Big 12 championship at Baylor in 21, or they were going to the national championship game in 22 for TCU. So it's not like it can't work. But when it's not working, then it is very easy to look at that and be like, well, is anybody really actually inspiring these guys? Because they're a little bit milquetoast as far as their personality goes. So interesting observation there, Eddie. Nate says Jalen Jackson's now known as Action Jackson. I hope that that's not because of Tim Brando. Tim Brando just drives me nuts. I think he's lost a step or 3. He can just be cheesy. And the thing that as a play-by-play guy myself. Drives me the most insane is just the pronunciations. I mean, the guy not once pronounced Felix Anudike-Uzomah correctly in like 5 different games. And he was botching names. Who did he botch that I was laughing at? I was watching the condensed version of the Baylor-Iowa State game today. Whose name? It was Baylor receiver. Hang on. I'm going to go ahead and just slam dunk this one home. Make sure I see it. Yeah, Monterey Baldwin. Like the way he Monterey. I'm trying to remember how he did it. He botched like Monterey Baldwin. I was just like, come on, guy. So anyway, I hope that's not just from him, but if it is, hey, more power to him. Guy's obviously accomplished a lot in his career. Who am I to hate? But yeah, he's. I think it's a grating listen, a grating with a T, not a D, a grating listen these days. All right. Big 12 championship race. Big 12 championship race right now feels very, very wide open. We're going to go through, digest all the teams that I think have changed their status this week in terms of Big 12 contender status. All right. So at the top, let me start with this. It is, as much as we talked about last week, like this thing is 1000% wide open. Totally confirmed. It remains that wide open. A lot of the contenders did not play this week. BYU, Colorado, K-State, all on buys. Utah was on a buy as well, too, right? So you had a lot of the teams that we figure to be up toward the top of the Big 12 standings not actually playing. So that's a part of this when you're thinking about who really changed their stature. But what's crazy about a lot of this is if you look at the Big 12 standings right now, the unbeatens in the league, it's Texas Tech, BYU, Iowa State, Colorado, West Virginia. This is where they ranked in the Big 12 preseason poll. Number 9, number 13, number 6, number 11, and number 7. Those are your top 5 teams in the Big 12. In terms of record, if you go pull up the standings at big12sports.com or at espn.com, you'll get the standings with those 5 teams up at the top. Say what you will about whether or not you think you would like power rate them there, but that's where they are right now. And it's honestly kind of damning for all of us in the media, right? We all look like idiots. Number 9, number 13, number 6, number 11, number 7. I could also counter and say, well, most people covering the league also said this is going to be a wild league and the most wild probably in the country. And so you go into it expecting that your picks are going to be wrong because that was your overall prediction for the conference. And that prediction has been correct. And that is how you spin things like a professional PR guy. But we actually really have like Utah. Okay, let's take the case of Utah. They didn't play this week, as I mentioned. But take the case of Utah. The Arizona loss and the Oklahoma State win both look a lot worse at this point after what happened this week. So now I'm left like, one, thinking again how wretchedly awful my take was 2 weeks ago that, hey, that win in Stillwater with a true freshman quarterback, Utah looks head and shoulders above the rest of the Big 12, and that's an indictment on everybody. Forget that. Maybe if Cam Rising comes back, they'll earn that sort of respect back. But right now, it's not it, man. I mean, West Virginia had a much more impressive performance in Stillwater than Utah did. Utah kind of, slowly grinded it out and beat Oklahoma State into submission, but West Virginia flash fried them. I mean, West Virginia came in and it was over by halftime easily. So you combine that with, hey, the Arizona loss doesn't look as great when Arizona loses at home to Texas Tech. Like, what do we think of Utah? What do we think of Utah? I think they are just merely a contender. They are nowhere near being out in front of anybody. They are just in the contender tier, and that's knocked them off a lot from where I anticipated them being at the beginning of the year. Talked about this a minute ago. Iowa State, you got to give them the respect at 1 or 2 right now. I'm not going to quibble too much, 1 or 2 if you're going them or BYU, but those are the 2 teams that deserve it right now. If doing this on meritocracy, you want to power rate things and say that someone else you think is actually a better team, fine, knock yourself out, be my guest. But if this is in any way a meritocracy, it's one of those 2 at 1 or 2. BYU probably does have the more impressive resume. I think Iowa State is a slightly better team, is the way that I would put it right now. Schedule leaves something to be desired in conference play. I understand it. Iowa State has not played Murderer's Row at all in the Big 12 with Houston and then Baylor. And, they're just not going to play Murderer's Row in the Big 12 this year, period. They will get Utah and K-State at the very end of the year, but they've got a chance to really build some momentum if they win in Morgantown this weekend, which will not be easy at all. That's a part of the blessing and the curse of the schedule. That game 2 weeks ago looked like, all right, well, they'll probably roll there. Now it's going to be a very stiff test for them in Morgantown. Speaking of West Virginia, let's just go to West Virginia next. They're back in the conversation. Felt like they were all the way out with about 4 minutes left to go in that Kansas game. They're back in the conversation. Hard to tell how much it really means to club Oklahoma State and Kansas come back and beat Kansas at home. Kansas seems like that season is just spiraling very quickly. They're 1-5. Oklahoma State is now 3-3 and 0-3 in the league. But going on the road and beating anybody as soundly as West Virginia did does mean something. That means something. And it tells me that West Virginia may be closer to probably what I thought they were at the beginning of the year. The expectations, the way we viewed West Virginia is what has made this feel like such a roller coaster, because if you bought into the hype, and I did buy into some of the hype at the beginning of the year, you buy into the hype, you think that they're like, okay, this is a team that could go beat Penn State, and this might be like legit 9-10 win team this year. Then they lose 2 games, and they lose to a Pitt team who, by the way, is still unbeaten. So combined 10-0, I believe it is, the 2 teams that West Virginia has lost to now. And you could say, well, all right, well, they had Pitt basically beat, choked it away, and both of those teams are now 10-0, and here they are 2-0 in the Big 12. West Virginia's probably about what I thought they were, which is like a 7 or 8 win team at the beginning of the year. That's at least within shouting distance of being in contention for going to Arlington. So if you pick off a game like this against Iowa State, you're definitely right there in it. I mean, West Virginia is in the conversation. So is Texas Tech. And I did get a little bit of pushback even from a Texas Tech fan when I declared them in contender status after their win last night. I had to chuckle at this one from Mark. But Mark said, I still don't know if we're any good. And, fair, Mark. I mean, the first 2 wins at home in Big 12 play, Cincinnati and Arizona State, those are definitely games that are as close to as manageable as it gets in the conference this year. And almost lost the game to Cincinnati. It was a pretty solid showing, I would say, against Arizona State. Beginning of the year, you give up 50+ to Abilene Christian. You go get thumped at Washington State without Taj Brooks. I can understand. Even the Arizona game was not particularly pretty. I can understand it. You'd be like, are we good? Are we good? We're 5-1 and 3-0 in the Big 12, but are we actually good? I get what the question is there, but you saw my response in that tweet. Is anybody good? Is anybody in the conference good? I think it's a fair question to raise. Everybody's got questions, and the fact of the matter is right now Texas Tech is 3-0 in the Big 12. That puts you in contender category. I don't really need to know much else. If you're 3-0 in the Big 12 based on how flawed everybody else seems to be, you are in the conversation. Other changes, I think Arizona is out for now, just majorly disappointing. That is another disappointment for me, especially just that the offense doesn't seem to be clicking or really have it. When you have a guy as special as Tetairoa McMillan, I get that he fumbled the ball at the end of the game, and that was the game sealing play for Texas Tech. But you have someone that special, it should be working better. You have a quarterback like Noah Fafita that should be working better. Even the Utah game, the well-timed clutch plays, but it was not like a consistent, we're marching the ball totally up and down the field necessarily. There have not been many moments where it's felt like the offense has really been ready to go like it was last year. And I think a lot of that falls on Brent Brennan. I would put a lot of that on just he and his coaching staff. That's very disappointing. So Arizona for right now, I cannot put them in the contender category. Just too much inconsistency. There's been we're almost a month and a half into the season. I've seen one game that I've liked from Arizona. That's it. I think Arizona State is pesky. They beat Kansas. Nice heroics there to win the game. I think Arizona State is pesky. They could put a scare into Utah, K-State, BYU, teams they all have left on their schedule. I don't believe in them to be consistent enough to be a real factor in the Big 12 title race. But them being pesky is a massive step forward from where they were last year. Nobody was saying that about Arizona State last year. And TCU and KU losing, they're nowhere near the discussion right now. Nowhere near that discussion. Anyway, all right, there's your rundown of where we're at in the Big 12 right now. Make sure you are subscribed to the Open for Business newsletter if you want more Big 12 coverage coming at you tomorrow. It's ofbnews.com, ofbnews.com to get subscribed to the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter. 2,500 other Big 12 fans reading. And if you get signed up, you'll get Big 12 news to your inbox multiple times per week. No SEC or Big 10 bias. Subscribe to the channel if you have not. If you are a Twitter watcher, make sure you get on over to John Kurtz on YouTube to subscribe. Get all the content throughout the week, not just these live shows that come through on Twitter as well. And if you like the video on your way out the door, that would be amazing as well. I would appreciate that very, very much. Thomas, weighing in here before I get out of here. Thomas says, proud of Tech as a fan, but I still don't see us winning the Big 12. Talented and tough as hell, but still too young. Hope they prove me wrong, though. Hey, I think that's a really fair, reasonable take on the situation, Thomas. I do. Baron Morton, I've got to admit, he's been better than I thought he would be this year. Definitely got to give him credit for that. Tech's defense still is hard to trust, though. That was a good effort against Arizona. And hopefully for Tech fans, a step forward for the defense. So we shall see. But for right now, you should just be enjoying the hell of it, especially after the way the year started. 1-1, gave up 50 points to Abilene Christian, took a blowout loss, had injuries all over the place. Things look a lot better. A lot better. Okay. Thank you all for being here. Again, like the video on your way out the door. Spread the word about the channel and all the content that I'm putting together to anybody and everybody far and wide. Let's continue to expand this great community of college football fans that we have here. So thank you all. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and I will talk to you very soon.